Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Matthew Taylor. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's Candidates Forum for the electorate of Braddon. I'm the Minister... Bring it up. I'll turn it on. Okay, is that better? That's definitely better. All right, there we go. Now, maybe people at home can hear me now. Let me start again then. My name's Matthew Taylor. I'm the minister at the Anglican Church down the road here at Devonport, and our local Devonport churches, they've all come together with very much appreciated help from, logistical help from Freedom for Faith, to organise this forum on behalf of all the churches in the full electorate of Braddon. And as we know, it's quite large. So lots of people will be streaming when they can't come to Devonport. We're at C3 Church in Devonport here tonight. So a big thank you to their pastors, Brian and Sharon Webber, and also their tech team here for enabling us to live stream this event tonight. So welcome to everyone online, whichever camera I'm supposed to be looking at, for joining us. It's great to have you with us. Welcome and thank you especially to our candidates that have made it here tonight for making the time to come and speak with us. We have with us Mal Hingston, Erin Morrow, and representing Adam Martin tonight is James Redgrave. Anne Urquhart has a prior engagement tonight but has sent in some responses, so we'll still be able to hear from her tonight as well. Each of the candidates will have an opportunity to introduce themselves shortly, but every candidate standing for Braddon has been invited to participate tonight. What we're going to do tonight, it won't be a debate-style affair like we've seen on TV recently. Simply, it's an opportunity for our candidates to address some of the issues that we have as Christian voters that we're particularly concerned about. That's the purpose of tonight. Our churches care deeply for all the people in our communities because Jesus taught us to love our neighbour. He showed us how, and he teaches us to live generously and to live sacrificial lives of service, putting others' needs before our own. So I'd like to thank all of the candidates for putting their hands up to run in this election as well, to serve the people of Braddon for the next few years. Now, the reason we invited the candidates to come and speak tonight is because we want to hear how they plan to serve us, not just us as the church, but also we want to know how they plan to serve everyone who lives in our communities. As I said, we care for our communities, but also to let them know what our concerns are, so they get to hear our voice as well. So it's a two-way street. So to help with this, we have tonight prepared 4 questions developed in consultation with the heads of many national churches with the help of Freedom for Faith, and we've adapted those through our local churches for the Tasmanian context. So we've got four questions tonight. The candidates have seen these questions beforehand, so they know what's coming. Our aim tonight is to finish at 8 o'clock. So any time that we have after the pre-prepared questions will be used to answer any questions that you have in addition to those 4 questions. To help us do this, tonight we're using the Slido website. You should be able to see it on the screen, or if you're at home, it should be at the bottom of your screen. That means that whether you're here with us in person in Devonport or live streaming from anywhere across the electorate, you can still ask your questions in real time as well, and we'll see if we can have them answered. To do this, all you need to do is simply go to slido.com, enter the code that is on the screen, and you'll see all the questions there, or you'll be able to ask your own questions. The questions that other people ask, they might be similar to your questions, so you can vote on the questions they've asked by hitting the thumbs up. So before you ask your question, please check to see if anyone else has already asked a similar question and vote on it instead of adding your own question, because we're asking our candidates the questions afterwards with the most votes. Okay, so we don't want the same question worded 2 or 3 different ways and sharing the votes between them. So even if it's not the way you would have worded it, if it's similar, maybe it's best to vote on that question for you. If you don't then see your question there, then feel free to type one in yourself that other people can vote on as well. Now, we probably won't get to ask all the questions if it's anything like our last forum. So what I'll do is afterwards, I'll provide the candidates with a list of all the questions that you've asked, so at least they're aware of your concerns, so they're not going wasted. They're not going to be wasted if you type them in, even if they don't get to address them tonight. Before we get to any of the questions, though, I'll invite each of the candidates to come and introduce themselves for about 3 minutes. Then I'll ask the pre-prepared questions and give each candidate 2 minutes to answer each one, and then we'll get to the rest of the questions after that. Just so you're thinking about what to ask, our pre-prepared questions are on the topics of gambling, food security, the cost of living, obviously, and religious freedom as well. So if you've got other things that you're concerned about, start thinking about what you might like to ask them then. Let me pray as we open up this evening, and then we'll hear from our candidates themselves. You've come to hear from them, not from me tonight. Let me pray. Loving God, we do thank you for this opportunity tonight for honest, open and respectful communication. Lord, help us all to wrestle well with the issues in our state and in our country, and knowing that we can't fix all the problems at once. Give us wisdom to know how best to tackle them with the resources available to us. Help us all to work together for the sake of all people, and may your will be done. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, in no particular order of preference, what I'll do is I'll ask Mal and then Erin to come and introduce themselves, and then James will come and introduce Adam to everyone. So welcome, Mal Hingston. Thank you.
G'day everyone, I'll just play with this a bit. Good? All right. So I love this old building. I love old buildings, so it's a pleasure to be inside this one. And I've just realised sitting back there, this is the first time I've actually spoken inside a church without getting in trouble. So when I was a kid, it wasn't, anyway. And also Zane, it's good to see you, mate. I haven't seen you for a lot of years. You are the reason I had no money between 17 and 21. Zane's bikes and bits. So good day, everyone. I'm Mal Hingston, your Liberal candidate for Braddon. The Northwest is a fantastic place to live, with an unmatched lifestyle and great opportunities for jobs and to raise a family. I've been fortunate to date in my own career to have some great opportunities with local businesses. I've worked right along the coast, starting from the carpet factory. That's right, I did a trade there at the East Devonport of the carpet factory, on to Delta Hydraulics, Ilfingstons in Burnie, and then back to Bridge Pro in Latrobe. In between these roles, I've been all over Australia, building major infrastructure in mining and defence. Having worked in mining, I know just how important our primary industries are. Our farming, our fish farming, our mining, our forestry. They're very important to our local industries, our local communities, and they provide the jobs that keep our communities together. That's why I'll protect those jobs. I want to look after them. I want to make sure that those jobs aren't sold out to someone in Canberra. Under a Liberal government, Macquarie Harbour will remain open for fish farming. We'll treat the residents and the workers of the West Coast that work in mining and fish farming with the respect they deserve. Now, even though it's been 35 years, I still remember what it's like to be a grade 10 school leaver looking for an opportunity. And how hard it is to get a foothold in the workforce. It's the old, you've got no experience, but you can't get experience because no one gives you a job. I'm committed to supporting local jobs and opportunities for our school leavers, so that our school leavers can stay right here in Braddon, in Tasmania, and be part of our community. Our lifestyle here in Braddon doesn't happen by accident, and that's why I focus my funding announcements on projects that support families and communities. Now, these projects include upgrades to bowls clubs, sporting clubs, football clubs, change rooms, community halls, event lighting, and today I was very pleased to announce $15 million for the Don River Railway. I think that's going to be an amazing tourist attraction for the area. These clubs are manned by amazing volunteers who give freely to support our communities, and I look forward to being a part of a government that can provide assistance and support to these communities that hold our society together. I'm putting my hand up as I'd like to take my real-world, practical, common-sense approach that I've picked up in 35 years of private industry, take that experience and common sense off to Canberra, and be part of a government that supports the institutions like the families that hold our communities together. And in a nutshell, that's me.
Right on time. Please, Erin.
Hello, everybody, including the people that are in front of me, but also the people that are online. My name is Erin Morrow. Braddon as an electorate, but specifically Devonport as a town, is my chosen home. I've lived all over the east coast of Australia, not Melbourne yet, and I'm a bit not so keen about that. I think that we have more consistent nature and sort of, you know, the weather is a little bit clearer down here. We don't have, you know, 4 seasons in an hour. So I think I'll stay here. I am by training a psychologist. I have 15 years experience working in various state mental health services in Queensland and in New South Wales. And I then also have a master's in organisational psychology. What the heck is that? You all want to know? Because that's what everybody says. So working not just with the individual in terms of their mental health problems, but working with systems to make sure that people are healthy within those systems, the systems are working properly. Also that workers are happy and that workers are safe and that processes are being done correctly. As well as a range of other things, including recruitment and selection and leadership management. So I work not just with the individual, but with groups, and I've done that for quite some time. But bringing my life to Tasmania has meant that I have stepped back into a clinical role, and I run a practice in Devonport. And it's been amazing to be able to engage with so many people who are either new to the area or they've been here for generations, but they all have the same love for the Northwest Coast. And one of the reasons why I decided to run was throughout my career I've always tried to advocate for people, and it's just become harder and harder and harder to work within those systems that become so complicated and so run by people working together with their mates that the average person is just not getting a go. Getting a mortgage is ridiculously hard. Going to the supermarket is just depressing. And the idea of trying to find a doctor's appointment, now that we have My Clinic Plus in Devonport, that's become so much easier, and I'm so grateful that Mirza has decided to set that up. But these are things that we should be able to have access to, and I'm routinely hearing that it's a struggle for people on the Northwest Coast. And it's something I want to stand for. And I want to be able to use the skills that I have in terms of being able to advocate and work with people to change behaviour, change their attitudes. I want to be able to work within the government so that we can change the attitudes of people towards making sure that people have the basics, making sure that we are looking after our fellow man and women. One of the things that I don't get to discuss that much, which I'm super happy about, that I can do tonight, is that I was raised as a Christian and I continue to practice that faith. And it's something that's incredibly important to me, and one of the reasons that I run is because, as Reverend Matt had said, Jesus was the ultimate servant leader. He gave his life and as an example for how we should live, and I'm so glad to be able to have that as an example for myself. When I think about going in and running in politics, it's always underpinned by the lessons that I have learnt from Christianity. Not necessarily Christianity itself every single step of the way, because I have learnt lessons in other areas of my life as well. But it is definitely a really important underpinning for me. I promise I will not quote scripture at you because that is Matt's job. But thank you so much.
No, I'm not Adam Martin, but I've been his wingman for this campaign and a little extra work prior to that. It's not often you come to know somebody that might be perfectly suited for politics, but Adam Martin is one of those individuals. Spent 4 years in Canberra in regards to recreational fishing, sitting on quite a few different panels there. He's been a carpenter like Jesus all his life. However, he's not secular. So when we do travel together around Braddon through this campaign, I've witnessed him meet with CEOs, meet with chief executive officers of different organisations, and be able to sit and communicate on that same plane and platform as them and take in what they're actually trying to say. And that doesn't happen too often. However, when we do go to other precincts within Braddon where there are less fortunate individuals that might be doing it not as well off as others, he's one of the first to reach into his pocket and give a handout or give an ear or a shoulder, depending on what's required. When it comes to religion, I think that's a real personal journey. I can speak for my own, but I won't. But Adam's been on that personal journey. He's spent a bit of time overseas in Canada and around the country quite a bit, and is, we would say, a learned scholar of what daily life is and what it actually means for most people. He can relate to pretty much everybody in this room and most of you at home watching in on us. And during this campaign, and one of the reasons why he's not here tonight, is that he has spent a great deal of time and energy actually going out to organisations that feel that they haven't been heard or they need to be heard. And tonight he's in Penguin with one of those organisations, listening to them and obviously offering some advice on what he might bring. Now, he's not a party person, so he is the only independent in Braddon running. However, if you were to deliver Braddon an independent, you might find that Braddon, over the next couple of decades, may never want for anything, because you could just imagine how much money might flow into Braddon with both parties wanting to get it back. So, yes, again, I'll say I'm not Adam, but yeah, thank you for that.
Thanks, guys. As I mentioned earlier, Anne Urquhart apologised tonight. She has a prior engagement, but has sent in responses, so I will read them at the right time on her behalf. Our aim tonight was to hear from as many of our candidates as possible, so we thank her for sending those responses in. She did say that she wanted to extend a sincere apology to attendees of the forum tonight because she wasn't able to make it, and has invited attendees or members of our churches to contact her at her TasLabor email address, which is not hard to find online. I won't read it out for you now, if you'd like to discuss any matters with her. So what we might do is move over to our prepared questions, and I'll ask the question, and then you guys can decide who speaks first. I'm trying to be democratic about it, so there's no preferences here at all. So our first question has to do with gambling that we talked about, because it is doing so much harm. So through gambling, Australians lose more per capita than any other country in the world. In 2003, there was the Murphy Review, and recommendation 26 of the Murphy Review was that there was a comprehensive ban on all forms of advertising for online gambling. So not a partial one, but a complete comprehensive ban. So the question that I'm putting to our candidates tonight is, will you commit to implementing all 31 recommendations of the Murphy Review in order to protect our kids and our community from gambling harm?
I'll start off by saying, gambling. I've had a mate that nearly went to jail, went so close to going to jail through gambling. He was stealing from his employer. It was like a disease, it was like a cancer for him. And it was only because family and friends, we sort of intervened in his life that kept him out of jail. And I'm happy to say there's a happy ending. He met an amazing woman and she straightened him right out. And so anyway, look, the opposition leader, Peter Dutton, took leadership on this issue nearly 2 years ago, stating the coalition's position is to ban gambling ads 1 hour before, during, and 1 hour after live sports broadcasts. A bill was put to the Senate, but Labor and the Greens voted against it. Labor has been sitting on a report from their own committee inquiry since 2023 and has made no commitment since. A coalition government will ensure families enjoying the broadcast of their favourite sporting event will be protected from gambling ads, which we know cause harm, particularly to children. The Albanese Labor government is failing Australian families by doing nothing.
Yes, we support a comprehensive ban. No hours, just a ban. And including TV and radio as well. I get really frustrated every time random sports bet or Ladbroke ads come up while I'm trying to watch 7 Plus. Because kids could see that any time, and it's just not safe, and it's not good enough. We absolutely need a ban, and it, particularly in terms of the Greens policy, it's urgently is what is discussed. Gambling is an insidious addiction that affects many people in the community, and it's hidden. We don't talk about it, and so it gets worse and worse and worse. And there are supports for it, but unfortunately, it's something that is not as well recognised as it probably should be. We would also support a ban from donations from gambling companies to political parties, and we would just generally like to be able to have a national regulator around gambling. I believe that people who are educated and informed about the risks that they are taking, they should be allowed to make their own decisions. And so if you want to gamble, that's okay, but only if you understand fully what you're doing, but also making sure that the companies that are engaging in those behaviours are not doing anything to trap or trick you into gambling, because there are strategies that mean that does happen. The other thing that we are particularly concerned about, and I speak about this, despite the fact that it's primarily a state issue, but the federal government is giving money. We don't support a stadium in Hobart that is going to have big screens in the back of every single chair that is going to have gambling advertising on it, because that wouldn't be covered in any ban. So we absolutely don't support that. We don't think that that should be something that Tasmanian young people or vulnerable adults should be exposed to. So we, as the Greens, we absolutely support taking proper and adequate steps towards managing the gambling problem that Australia has.
Yes, I support the implementation of all 31 recommendations of the Murphy Review, including a complete ban on online gambling advertising. Gambling harm is not just a personal issue, it's a public health crisis. Australia has the highest per capita gambling losses in the world. Our kids are being targeted with relentless betting ads during sport, on social media, and even on billboards. I believe a federal government has a moral duty to protect families and communities from the manipulation and destruction caused by the gambling industry. The Murphy Review provided a strong evidence-based blueprint. Now we need the political will to act. As your hopeful independent MP, I will not be beholden to gambling lobbyists. I will push for an end to gambling ads across TV, radio, streaming, digital and outdoor media, the introduction of a national self-exclusion register that actually works, mandatory pre-commitment limits, robust funding for gambling harm prevention, education and support services. This is about protecting children, supporting struggling families and restoring integrity to sport and public life.
Allow me to read Anne Urquhart's response. So this comes from Anne of the Labor Party. She's written this. We take seriously our responsibility to protect Australians from the harms of online gambling. We're working diligently through the committee's recommendations. The underlying principle guiding our response is harm reduction. We've been consulting widely with stakeholders to understand their views on the recommendations, including harm reduction advocates and public health experts. But we've been busy implementing other reforms at the same time. Labor has done more than any other government to tackle the harms from gambling addiction. We have introduced monthly activity statements, introduced new evidence-based taglines and mandatory staff training, passed legislation to ban the use of credit cards for online gambling, launched Bet Stop to allow people to exclude themselves from online gambling, which has included uptake of more than 35,000 people so far. Introduced mandatory pre-verification, meaning wagering service providers must verify a customer's identity when they register for an account and before they can place a bet. This strengthens protections for underage Australians and those self-excluded through BetStop, and worked with the states and territories to introduce mandatory minimum classifications for computer games containing gambling-like content from September 24. We know there is more work to do to respond to this challenge. And again, that was from Anne Urquhart. That's our first question about gambling. Just a reminder that anyone that wants to ask other questions, apart from gambling, food security, cost of living and freedom of religion, please get onto Slido and ask the questions. A few have come in already, and you can vote on those or ask your own. Let me ask our candidates our second question, though, to do with food security. In regard to food security and the rising cost of living, Tasmania is facing a serious challenge. Recent data shows that more than 84,000 households in Tasmania are now struggling to put food on the table. In fact, when you look closely at everyday families trying to access healthy food, it's estimated that up to 1 in 2 Tasmanians are experiencing some level of food insecurity. This isn't just about food relief, it's about long-term solutions. Tasmania has already built a proven community-led model that works. Over 260 local partners, supported by statewide organisations like our Loaves and Fishes Tasmania, are delivering food, training, jobs and hope to more than 16,000 people every week. Our state government has shown strong leadership through the Food Relief to Food Resilience Action Plan, but the success of that work and its future depends on federal investment that matches the needs and backs what's already working here in Tasmania. So the question to our candidates is this. There's actually two parts to the question. If elected, will you commit to direct federal funding for Tasmania's food security, specifically to support our proven community-led models and critical infrastructure like loaves and fishes? And the second part of the question, and can you be specific about the level or kind of support you would commit to ensure Tasmanians are not left behind in national policy? Over to our candidates.
G'day again. We should not have a food security problem in our part of Tasmania. We live in one of the most amazing food bowls in the world, and definitely in Australia. We've got an abundance of food, we've got great transport, great refrigeration. There is no excuse at all for any people in this electorate to have a food security problem. Peter Dutton has announced a coalition government will provide $50 million for food charities to expand their services and to include school breakfast programs across the country. I spoke with Andrew Hillier, the CEO from Devonport-based Loaves and Fishes, and I was previously familiar with what Loaves and Fishes do. I did a bit of volunteer work with those guys, with my nephew, over the COVID period when things were quiet and I wasn't working. So I was familiar with what they're doing. I caught up with Andrew, and my commitment to him was I will help work with him and I will help him get, or us get in Tasmania, our portion of that $50 million. Thank you.
This is where things get a little bit political, and I'm hoping you guys are up for that, given that you're talking to political candidates. So, as the Greens, we don't commit before an election to specific amounts of money that we haven't costed or that we haven't assessed, like an organisation on its merits. Because for us, it's too much like buying a vote. But people still need an indication of what we are going to do and the sort of things that we're likely to commit to when we are in government. So what I will say is that we would like to address some of these issues at their source, and that means going nationally. And so we will look at making sure that price gouging is illegal, because no one should struggle with food security in this area, 100%. And on nights like tonight, we definitely have excellent refrigeration. So, Mal is 100% correct. The other side of things, it's not just about supermarkets, it's also about farmers and making sure that the produce that they're selling, that there's a fair code of conduct around who they're engaging with to sell that food to, so that they're not struggling, and then the consumer on the other side of things aren't being price gouged. In terms of addressing things at its source, that's some of the things that we're going to do. We also have a costed school lunch program as well. And as a realist in politics, I do understand that it's not just as simple as going, hey, here's some policies, they will fix things immediately. And so as a representative for Braddon, I would commit, and no, I cannot give you a figure, I'm so sorry. I can commit 100% to working with the charitable organisations here that do amazing work, like Loaves and Fishes, we've got Grants Vans as well, to making sure that I engage with those organisations to make sure that they are being adequately funded while we are trying to fix the issue at its source.
Tasmania has the potential to be one of the most food secure places in the world, but only if we act now, right now. Too many of our small and medium farmers are under threat from rising costs, foreign land acquisitions, and a supply chain that prioritises corporate profits over local resilience. At the same time, 1 in 2 Tasmanians are now experiencing some form of local food insecurity. That's unacceptable in a state as rich in land, water, growing potential as ours. If elected, I will commit to direct federal funding for the Tasmanians' food security, specifically to support proven community-led models like Loaves and Fishes and statewide network, of over 260 plus local partners already feeding and training more than 16,000 Tasmanians every week. If in a position to negotiate in Parliament, I will push for a minimum of 10 million annually in federal co-funding to support and expand Tasmania's food relief and food resilience action plan. Infrastructure upgrades like regional storage, refrigerated logistics and commercial kitchens that help scale up groups like Loaves and Fishes. Support for regional growers and processors to feed into local food programs, school meals, keeping food dollars in Tasmania. Integration of Tasmanian into national food resilience policy, so we're not left behind in crisis planning or investment. But food relief is only one part of the story. My broader farming and food security policy includes shifting to an abundance agenda, ending the anti-growth approach to agriculture from government bureaucracies, protecting Tasmanian farmland from foreign buy-up and speculative land banking, rebuilding regional processing facilities so we don't need to ship produce away and buy it back at city prices, expanding water security with an investment in environmental responsible pumped hydro and long-term irrigation infrastructure, empowering regenerative and innovative farmers who are producing more while healing the soil. Food security is not just about access, it's about control, affordability and sovereignty. The old parties treat food like a commodity, I'll treat it like a community right.
Thanks, guys. This is Anne's response on the question from the Labor Party. Food relief is critically important, and when people are struggling, we must ensure that they have access to necessities, including food. In 2023, the federal Labor government provided $1.3 million to Tasmanian food relief organisation Loaves and Fishes to purchase its warehouse so it could continue its vital work. In addition to ongoing federal funding for food relief, in 2024, Labor invested an additional $14.4 million in funding for the 192 emergency relief and all 3 Commonwealth-funded food relief providers across Australia to help meet the needs of all Australians. That's food relief. She's also written about food security. Food security is an important goal for all Tasmanian households, and a re-elected Albanese Labor government will help secure Australia's food future with the development of a new national food security strategy, Feeding Australia, it's called. Australia produces twice as much food as it needs, and we want to make sure everybody along the food system gets their fair share while also putting downward pressure on prices for consumers. Feeding Australia will identify opportunities to improve supply chains, boost resilience and minimise price volatility and costs at the checkout. Federal Labor is also cracking down on price gouging by supermarkets because Australian families deserve fair prices for their groceries. It is unfair for supermarkets to exploit consumers by inflating prices and profits when they do not face enough competition. Households and families must be able to put food on the table without sacrificing other basic needs. And that's the end of Anne's response for that question. We'll move on to question 3, which we'll put to our candidates, and there's more questions coming on Slido, so keep thinking those through and feel free to add more to those if you'd like to. But question 3 for our candidates. So while we've talked about food security, and it is a big issue, but many people are also struggling with their other expenses, as we all know. Anglicare Tasmania reported in a 15.5% increase last year of Tasmanians accessing the National Debt Helpline. And we're 4 months into this year, so I don't have the stats on the last 4 months. So the question to our candidates is this: what will you do to ease the cost of living pressures on individuals and families, especially those most at risk? Thank you.
Matthew, is there a time limit that I can talk about this one?
I'll give you a minute or two extra for this one. I think it's an important one.
I've done a lot of door knocking and I've talked to a lot of people around Braddon in the last 8 months, and the number one issue is cost of living. In the last 3 years under this Labor government, and this could get a bit political, guys, so sorry about that. In the last 3 years, the buying power of our wages across the country has gone down by 8%. We have never seen that. We started keeping figures, facts and figures after World War II. We have never seen that drop in lifestyle. So a coalition has announced it will immediately cut the fuel excise in half, saving individuals and families 25 cents a litre, around $14 every time they fill up an average guy's car. So we're going to do that on day one. And the reason we're targeting that is it helps most people drive a petrol car, and we want to help most people. So whether you're a student driving to school, an older student driving to university, or whether you're looking for a job, or whether you've got a job, or whether you're retired and not really interested in working anymore, you're going to benefit from that. Further, we will provide a tax rebate. So this is after the in the next financial year after that. We'll provide a tax rebate of up to $1,200. So importantly, that's a rebate, not a deduction. So it's $1,200 off the tax bill for the upcoming financial year. So that around about 95% of Braddon's taxpayers will apply for that. So two-income family, $2,400 per household. But the big one is just getting back to that drop in lifestyle. So a Liberal government generally is a better financial manager. We sort of, historically, we come in after Labor, tidy up the mess. We're sort of trying to do it in Victoria at the moment. We did it in Tasmania 10 years ago after a Labor Green government. We're going to need to do it at the federal level as well. Inflation is run higher for longer than it should have been. Interest rates are run higher than what they should have been for longer than they should have been. The average family around the country, $50,000 worse off because of the higher interest rates that they've paid over the last 3 years. So basically, families have spent their savings, they've run out of money, and I'm not surprised at all that they're accessing help services. Better fiscal management, I think.
So cost of living is definitely one of the things that is coming up on the doors for me as well. It's unsurprising, we're talking to the same people. They're saying the same things across the political spectrum because they want people to listen and they want something done about this. And so the Greens commit to a range of different things that will help across the whole sort of spectrum of cost of living, because it's not just in one area. Food, as is pointed out, food is a big part of it, and it's definitely a big part of my weekly expenses. But in terms of cost of living, we have a plan for getting dental and mental health fully funded under Medicare. Lots of us are avoiding going to the dentist because, that just, it takes all the cash out of your wallet. As I've already mentioned, we talked about supermarket price gouging being illegal and breaking up the supermarket duopoly, which is particularly important up here in the northwest of Tasmania because other places have Aldi and Costco on the mainland. We want to cap rent increases and regulate the banks to deliver lower, fairer mortgages, making GPs free and bringing back open, free public health centres. We want 50-cent public transport, and Greens pressure has already achieved this in Queensland, and so we will be able to do it in the balance of power at a federal level. As much as I hate to acknowledge this, public transport is not as much of a thing up here in the northwest, but for those people who use it, it will be a big deal. And it might also motivate people to actually use public transport more if it's not costing as much. Then we have universal free childcare and free early education, childhood education, and then wiping all student debt. The PM had free education. Why shouldn't we? I think that that's particularly important. So all of those things have a flow-through effect, whether it's immediately in terms of your hip pocket when you go to the GP, to that massive number that for most people, let's be honest, is growing when you look at your HEX balance or your TAFE fees, and it will be something that we will be able to, that will be saving people between hundreds and thousands of dollars just right there. So those are the things that we commit to do to help reducing that debt and that squeeze, because it's not appropriate that anybody should be having to be stressed about putting a roof over their head, feeding their family, or being able to pay to be able to see a doctor. They just shouldn't be having to do that.
It's true, we are in a cost of living crisis, and the major parties are either in denial or stuck offering shallow short-term fixes. Here's what I will do. Tax big gas properly, just like Norway does, and use the revenue to fund genuine public services. Freeze energy prices, increasing for households and small businesses while we overhaul the energy market rules. Build thousands of public and affordable homes using federal investment and local supply chains. End corporate price gouging by bringing back a tough ACCC powers and enforcing fair pricing across groceries, fuel and utilities. Raise the base rate of job seeker and youth allowance so no one is left in survival mode. I want to support free school meals well beyond the current $14.6 million program and help support the likes of Loaves and Fishes to deliver the program. I also support universal dental care, starting with the most disadvantaged regions. This isn't just about easing pressure, it's about rebuilding fairness in a system that's been rigged too long in favour of the top end of town.
Anne's response to the question is this. The Albanese government is stepping up to help with the cost of living while getting inflation down. Inflation is down, wages are up, unemployment is low, and interest rates have started to come down. We've delivered help with the cost of living, tax cuts for every taxpayer, energy bill relief for every household, cheaper medicines, cheaper childcare, boosts to Commonwealth rent assistance, and cutting student debt. We have further committed to further tax cuts for every taxpayer, an extra $150 in energy bill relief for every household to the end of 2025, more bulk billing for all Australians so people can see the GP for free, even cheaper medicines by cutting the maximum cost of PBS medicines to $25, cut all HEX debts by 20%, build a universal early childhood education and care system with our 3-day guarantee, and make supermarket price gouging illegal. We will introduce this legislation by the end of this year. And that's the end of Anne's response for that question. So that's our first 3 questions on those topics. The fourth one is about religious freedom, which isn't just about what we believe in the privacy of our own homes, but about the right to express those beliefs, to speak openly, to practice freely, as well as not being forced to say or do things that goes against our faith, both privately and as faith-based organisations, even when some people disagree with those beliefs. So the question to our candidates on this issue is, how will you protect the rights of individuals to live and faith-based organisations to operate according to their faith?
I forgot to mention in the last answer that you just can't spend your way out of a cost of living crisis. The Coalition is committed to ensuring that freedom of religion, freedom of speech and freedom from discrimination, including on the basis of race or religion, are all protected and promoted. Whilst all Australians have the right to express their views, including people with controversial views, they must remain within the framework of Australia law. A Dutton Coalition government will continue to oppose moves from the Labor and the Greens to regulate and restrict free speech online. Now, if anyone was paying attention, just before Parliament wound up, Labor tried to get some misinformation and disinformation bills through Parliament. We should be very, very worried about that. It's basically censoring online opinion. So we should absolutely be censoring online hatred and anything that's taking away from society. But expressing views that might be inconvenient for people is something that we should not be censoring. Thank you.
So this is an intensely sensitive and complex issue. And I've actually spent probably more time thinking about how to answer this than any of the other questions that have been asked, because it's not actually straightforward and it's not as simple as free speech. If you say to somebody, whether it's online or otherwise, and please, I'm going to give you a content warning. If you say to somebody, you need to effing kill yourself because you are gay, I don't care where you say that. You don't get to tell somebody that that's what they should do to themselves, whether they're gay, whether they're disabled, whether their skin colour is a different colour to yours. You don't get to do that without there being consequences. We all have agency or choice. We can say those things, but there are consequences for your actions. However, we also have the experience where we have the right, as it was mentioned in the videos that I was sent, enshrined in a human rights convention, to believe as we want to believe and to have religious freedom. And I'm fine with that, and I think that that should be something that is considered to be important to our multicultural community. But I'm really super conscious that I'm here speaking to a bunch of, people from Christian churches, and that I myself am Christian as well. And so when we talk about religious freedom, it cuts all ways. It's not just about Christians, because that's not the only religion in the world. It's about the right to express those things that you believe, regardless of what your religion is. But I think it is something that it is important that we are able to have confidence that we don't need to be afraid to express our point of view. However, there will always be consequences with expressing points of view, and protecting those consequences for being, from being severe or over the top or unnecessary, I think is really important. And it needs to be commensurate with the current understandings of society in general. And that also means that we are protected from people who might hold extreme beliefs that they themselves identify as religious, because we have had a range of different cases where people have, particularly children, have been harmed. And there's one case that's happening in the courts now in Queensland where a young girl was killed. And the defence is that it was part of our religious beliefs. That's not okay. But that's the outlier. And so we have to prepare for all eventualities, knowing that when a law or a rule like this is created, there are always going to be people who want to use that in a way that it should not be used. And so it has to be done with lots of careful deliberation, and it has to be something that we think about so that any of the unintended consequences that come from creating rules or laws like that are thought of and prepared for. And for myself, it's something that I think shouldn't be bounded within an election cycle. It needs to be something that we're working on consistently, irrespective of the government of the day, because it is part of our society.
I strongly support the right of individuals to live according to their faith, or for faith-based organisations to operate in line with their values, provided it does not harm or deny the dignity of others and does not breach any state or federal laws. In an increasingly polarised world, we must defend freedom of conscience and belief without descending into culture wars. As an independent, I won't be bound by party lines. I'll back genuine religious freedom and respectful coexistence for all Australians.
And this is Anne's response for the Labor Party. Labor believes in and supports the right of all Australians to have and to manifest their religion or beliefs, and the right of religious organisations to act in accordance with the doctrines, tenets, beliefs or teachings of their faith. The draft religious discrimination legislation developed by the Albanese government would have prevented discrimination against people of faith and maintained the right of religious schools to preference people of their faith in the selection of staff. The bill also aimed to prohibit discrimination in public places such as workplaces, schools, clubs and healthcare settings based on religious belief or activity, including if a person does not hold any religious belief. We support a bipartisan approach to these issues because we believe that wherever possible, efforts to enhance anti-discrimination protections should be done in a way that brings Australians together. The Prime Minister made it clear that bipartisan support was needed to progress these reforms to ensure the protections would be lasting and not invite a divisive debate. Sadly, bipartisan support was not provided by the Liberal opposition. In addition, Labor recognises, respects and will protect the right of parents to send their kids to religious schools because of the beliefs and values they teach their children. To that end, religious schools must continue to be able to build and maintain communities of faith, including by giving preference to people of the same faith in the selection of staff. At the same time, no student or member of staff should be discriminated against because of who they are. And that's the end of Anne's response there. So thank you to our candidates for preparing responses to those questions. The Slido have received quite a few questions. We might not get to them all, but I might just start with the first one. The way we'll work this is I'll put the question to the candidates, and if they want to answer, they can. If you don't feel like answering, that's okay. But the first one's a very simple one, so it'll be quick, and then I'll get to the other questions. Someone has asked, or several people have voted, the top question so far is, where will your preferences go instead of waiting to get to the polling booth? They can check it out first. Thank you.
Adam's clear that his preferences will be Liberals last, and he understands that the rest of Braddon can make their decision on where their preferences want to go for the lower house.
With my 35 years of industrial background, my focus is jobs and opportunities. I want to create those jobs that I talked about earlier. When I was looking about where my preferences should go, that's exactly how I filtered out the other candidates. So people that are anti-jobs, anyone that wants to shut down our industries and fight against jobs in Braddon and take those opportunities away so we count. So our school leavers have got to leave the electorate. They're at the bottom of the list and they just work up from there. Most likely to shut our jobs down, right at the bottom. That's the Greens, and they to work up from there. My preferences are on our how to vote sheets. We're handing them out at pre-polling, and they're also on my Facebook page. Thank you.
Oh, I want to respond to some of that nonsense, but I'm not going to. So we have preferenced Adam Martin, second, and then we had 4 not so great options after that, because we're pretty unhappy with Labor in terms of their stance on the environment, but unfortunately the other individuals who are running were worse. So we have Labor third and Liberals fourth, and then the other 2 individuals who are from the Trumpet of Patriots and One Nation are 5th and 6th. Please feel free to ask me additional questions personally on my email if you want to know more about any of that.
Thank you. The rest of the questions obviously have come through Slido, so come from people here or people at home. And obviously these 3 are the ones that are going to be able to answer those and won't be able to do that. So the second question is, how will your party create meaningful competition in all sectors to create real choice for consumers and drive down prices? I'll read it again for you. How will your party create meaningful competition in all sectors to create real choice for consumers and drive down prices? Any takers?
I'll talk about the supermarkets because that's a hot topic, cost of living, food security. And they get beaten up a bit, and not necessarily undeservedly. But supermarkets' profits are 3% of their revenue. There's probably very few businesses that have got a sustainable business model that are running on a 3% margin. So the ACCC looked at the supermarkets for 12 months, found no evidence of price gouging, and they're running on a 3% margin. So whether you like the supermarkets or not, we need to accept that they do run a very efficient operation. They do put a lot of pressure on their supply chain to get the cost out in the supply chain. That does hurt our farmers. But we do have competition here. It's not just 2 supermarkets. We've got IGAs, we've got Hill Streets, and I do not support giving $30 million to a German-owned company to set up in Tasmania and compete against IGA or Hill Street. Thank you.
We know from experience that other supermarket chains that don't run on a convenience model like IGA do lead to lower supermarket prices. It happens in most of the major cities on the mainland, and I expect that it would work exactly the same way in Tasmania. But I don't think it needs to be a specific company. It can be anybody. I personally love Costco. There's some great stuff you can get there. But obviously with the way things are in America, I'd have some concerns about, what would happen if that particular company were to come along. So competition is good. I think those of you who are wondering, you might want to go and actually check what the results of the ACCC investigation were. But I think one of the important things that I have learned about, particularly in this election campaigning process, is that the cost of freight is one of the things that makes it really difficult for Tasmania. And so we have a freight equalisation scheme. So one of the issues, for example, is that it might cost $9 to buy a bottle of milk on King Island, and that just shouldn't be the way it is. And so if you imagine how much it's costing to get stuff to King Island. We're not paying the same amount of extra, but we are definitely paying more. And it's something that we're committed to make sure that that freight equalisation scheme is fit for purpose, which currently it isn't. So we would like to invite competition. We would like to make sure that the freight isn't prohibitive. And in terms of manufacturing and bringing that back into Australian hands and locally done, again, that's a very complex thing, and it depends on the industry that you're in. But that also would be a good thing. But people have to understand that when you manufacture things on Australian soil, there are laws and regulations that make that more expensive compared to when that takes place in other countries where those rules aren't. And so some of those goods, they're going to be more expensive, and that's part of the reason why it doesn't happen, because it isn't seen as being competitive. But there are a range of different things that can assist with that while we still pay our workers well and make sure that they're healthy and safe. There are a range of other things that can help with that.
So Adam's not a party, he's an independent, but as a crossbencher, I'm sure Adam will go to bat for all industry and manufacturing in Braddon. If there's one thing I do know about Braddon, we are extremely creative, we're extremely smart, and we can create stuff at a very simple level but extremely effective here. We only have to see the military manufacturing that's going on here at the moment, and some of the other enterprises, Elphinstone and the rest of it right across Braddon, that actually deliver simple, very effective modernisation of manufacturing here in Australia, and we need to do more of that. Adam will support them as a crossbencher by negotiating with whoever is elected that party to ensure that more funding comes into Braddon to build those industries. He's also wanting to support a food hub out at East Devonport from local farmers and local producers to ensure that those people can battle against the two major supermarket chains here, Coles and Woolworths, to ensure that the prices are then competitively come down by having a grassroots, local, innovative food hub out at East Devonport. Thank you.
You guys must be having a lot of fun, right? We've only got 20 minutes left. Time flies when you're enjoying yourself, don't you? So I hope you're enjoying yourself. We've actually got 9 more questions, so we won't get through them all. So we'll pick a couple of them, and as I said earlier, I'll provide all of the questions that you've asked to the candidates afterwards. So at least they're knowing what's on your mind. The one with the most votes at the moment, though, is that the question is this: governments only have our money to spend via taxation. Everything offered for free actually comes from us. So what are you cutting to fund the new free stuff? I'll read it again, give you a sec. So governments only have our money to spend via taxation. Everything offered for free actually comes from us. So what are you cutting to fund the free stuff?
I feel like this question will be best answered by the other parties because they want to spend their way out of a cost of living crisis, so I'll hand it over.
We're not cutting anything because we don't need to. We've costed what it would look like if the 1 in 3 major corporations who don't pay tax actually do pay tax. Basically, in a wealthy country like ours, we should not have to be cutting anything to be able to give people above the basics of their needs. And if those companies that are in Australia actually paid their way, the same way that they do in other countries where they have exceptional standards in terms of their quality of living, we could have the same thing here. Nothing needs to be cut.
as Adam stated before, happy to tax the big end of town a little harder, including the gas that's going offshore virtually untaxed. That alone would bring down a lot of cost of living. So again, as an independent and a cross-batcher, Adam's only going to be there to keep them all honest and make them have a little more integrity.
Thanks, guys. Our next question has the most votes. It says this. It says to do with religious freedom. How do you decide, excuse me, whose dignity or victimhood is worth more? If an individual contradicts a community of faith, how do you protect both parties? So I'll read it again for us. How do you decide whose dignity or victimhood is worth more? If an individual contradicts a community of faith, how do you protect both parties? Any takers on that? Doesn't have to be any.
I think that the answer is actually quite key in the phrasing of that question. When you have a community, it's a big group of people or a moderate group of people, whereas an individual is an individual, they're by themselves. And so I think that it's always important to consider the individual in terms of, you know, when they're having to face off against a community. That's always important to take into account the trauma that takes place there. I think the other thing that's very important to acknowledge is that harm occurs, and when that occurs, it's not up to a community to say that it hasn't. If an individual says that it has taken place, it has. Whether that's something that needs redress or it needs to just be acknowledged is a separate matter. And I also think that when a community takes offence at something, when they haven't actually been harmed, they just need to deal with the offence. You know, it happens. We need to cope with that. But at the same time, we also need to be aware that people are entitled to their beliefs, and they're entitled to feel safe and to feel that that communal sense of being able to share that sameness together, and that a single individual threatening that can be very detrimental as well. So personally, I decided on a case-by-case basis. And as somebody who has been part of a community that probably did harm people, in terms of the religion that I was previously affiliated with has been very harmful towards the LGBT community. That's something where I think as an organisation we have to take that on board and adjust our behaviour. And then also having been on the receiving end as an individual where the organisation absolutely refused to acknowledge that they'd done any harm, it's incredibly complex, and it's something where organisations do need to be more accountable for their behaviour instead of just going, no, didn't do anything, and turning a blind eye because they're the big entity. I also know that question is a rather fraught question and is often a bit of a trap, and particularly when somebody uses the term victimhood. It's often coming from an individual who doesn't like the fact that people have been victims, and so then vilifies the victim. I don't know if it's the case in this circumstance, but unfortunately there's a certain amount of dog whistling that occurs using certain words, but without sitting down with the individual or the people who wanted those questions asked, it's very hard to tell the intent. But I'm also super aware that that may have been part of that question.
I've spent a bit of time managing companies, and and steering management groups. And there's a filter that I use. So if someone young comes into the business and they're in a situation where the business has not treated them well, and I think the same applies whether it's someone that's coming up against an organisation or a religion or any organisation. If you replace that person that feels like in that situation with one of your children, of your grandchildren, how would you like your child, someone closer to home than just a random employee? Or so for me, if I apply that filter, if I say to a manager, how would you feel if that was your grandchild in that situation? If you apply that filter to a lot of situations, you get the answer you're looking for.
Okay, we have about 15 minutes left. Our next question says this. Phone addiction, social media problem, gambling ads are hurting our kids, stopping healthy outside living and learning. What can you do to help parents fix this problem, is how the question is worded. I'll read it again. Phone addiction, social media problem, gambling ads is hurting our kids, stopping healthy outside living and learning. What can you do to help parents fix this problem?
8 months ago, I was an engineer running construction projects, and I stepped out of that career, and I decided to put my hand up for a political career. I had no idea how toxic the online environment was. For a 51-year-old male, the abuse that I cop online, and lucky I got a thick skin, and it just washes over me. It doesn't bother me. But I should not have to be subject to that. And I've seen the same with the local councillors lately. It is horrendous. Now I'm thinking, these platforms are smart enough that if I'm sitting here talking to you and I'm talking about a holiday to Bali, the next thing you know, a holiday to Bali starts popping up in my Facebook feed. Like there's some pretty smart algorithms going on in the background there. We need to be leaning on these companies, Facebook, whatever it is, to filter out some of this stuff before it gets to the end user. I think we can do a lot more in that space, and I think we need to do more.
I love Mal's playground platforms because he wants more playgrounds, which I agree with. I'm like, yeah, let's do some stuff together. So I think that the more access there is to exciting stuff outside where children are safe and they're able to engage and parents feel as though they can take a child to a decent location is really important. As a psychologist, this is something that I treat once it gets to the addiction stage. So I know how to do all of that, but I don't think that's quite the answer that you're looking for. I think that we do need to make sure that we are engaging with the tech companies that control these platforms, because there is stuff that they can do, 100%. And I think that allowing families the capacity to be less stressed and not as concerned about all of the cost of living stuff means that there's less time sending kids off to use their phones because mum or dad or caregiver are stressed about what's happening next, or needing more downtime because they're having to work 2 jobs just to, pay for the food bill. And so I think having a more well-rounded, less, sort of work-centric life would also help with that, because when a parent is not as, involved in thinking about other things, they actually have the capacity to sit down and spend time with their kid. They may actually want to use the playgrounds that Mal is going to build with their kids, because I know that when I'm less stressed and I hang out with my niece and nephew, I will go and I will actively play with them, and I see that happening with parents. But when parents themselves are also on their phones as well, when their kids are on the playground, it also sends a bit of a message. So I think it's a multifaceted issue where adults need to take some responsibility for their own phone use, but also having decent outlets outside is important, but also reducing the amount of stress on the adults so that they can spend more quality time with their children is really important.
It is a current reality of this world, isn't it, that we're all spending more time on our phones, and through an election campaign, we're never off them. Adam stated clearly that gambling ads would be banned, so that would take place if he's elected, and would force that through. That's one of his policies. Yeah, look, perhaps at a federal level, there may be need for a committee to be stood up to actually investigate this, because these addictions and Zoom scrolling, or whatever you want to call it, is probably something that will affect our kids into the future if not addressed now. So it might be time, when the new government is formed, that they look at standing up a committee at a federal level.
Now, we're not going to get to all of the questions. With our final 8 minutes, what I might do is the next 2 most popular questions, I'll throw them both at you, and then you guys can choose which ones you want to, if you want to answer one or the other. You might be able to get to both, because they're 2 very different sides. One's on the economy, one's more about your personal beliefs. So I'll throw both of them at you. The first one is, Australia's investment in innovation has plummeted over past decades. How will you increase and attract innovation in various industries? So how will you increase and attract innovation in various industries? And the other question is, how do your personal beliefs align with your party's beliefs and policies? So why did you choose to run for your party or as an independent? So there's two ways you can look at those 2. I'll let you guys tackle whichever ones in the time we've got left.
Innovation's an interesting one. So Australians are generally pretty good at innovating stuff. We love inventing stuff, we create stuff, and we develop stuff. I think we probably get a little bit fatigued with developing stuff and then seeing it go offshore and monetised elsewhere. We did it with solar panels. Solar panels, New South Wales University, Sydney University, the technology went off to China, and now China's killing the world with killing that market with they're making the money. We spent the money developing it. I've got a few different stories about that over the years, but I think actually I think we need to get better at monetising what we actually develop, rather than letting foreign companies come in and buy it out when it's just good, just on a point of going good. And I've got a bit of a sore story there, but anyway, that's a story for another day. But the party beliefs, I'm a Liberal at heart. I do believe in individual effort. I do believe that the best stuff in life is stuff that you've worked for. I think there's a lot of satisfaction in getting out of bed in the morning, going to work and working to support the family, put yourself through school. There's a lot of identity in that. I'm not a huge fan of free stuff. I think if you give free stuff away, it's good to support people that need support. Don't get me wrong, but if you're getting free stuff, generally you don't appreciate it. So yep, that's me. Thank you.
Probably an easy pick as to which one I'm going to answer. So for me, the Greens represent the party that has the most genuine Christ-like values in terms of wanting to make sure that people have what they need to be able to survive. They stand up for the least of these. They engage in non-violent protest. Depending on which church you go to, will depend on how much this is brought out. But Jesus was not the first rebel or the first protester, but he was definitely one of the ones that stick in people's memory in terms of somebody who stood up to the system and said, no, this is not good enough. But at the same time, where the rules were appropriate, he respected them. And we have an opportunity amongst our political parties to look after the people and not the companies, not the corporations. We need to, as it were, throw the money lenders out of our sacred spaces, out of our homes. We need to be able to be our siblings' keeper and have that be okay. And we need to show people love and kindness. And that's the thing that, as I have looked at all of the parties, because I've been quite involved and aware of politics since I was quite young, when I compare the policies and the attitudes, I have found love and compassion for humankind amongst the Greens. I've not found that the same way in many other organisations. And so therefore it's an organisation that I feel represents me and my beliefs as a Christian woman better than any other party at this time.
Several decades ago, we had a beautiful tool in this country to enhance our manufacturing and economic abilities, and I think it's time to bring it back. And that was our 150% R&D tax break to allow companies to invest that. And how Adam will do that is by taxing the gas companies that aren't taxed at all at the moment. Thank you.
We have 2 minutes. We'll be very quick. We'll squeeze one more in for everyone. Short-term economic gains delaying action on climate change result in long-term expense. How will you balance the two immediate needs of climate crisis and economy? So how do you balance the two things? 38 seconds each. Such an easy question.
Great question. And I've got no problems at all taking my love for the environment into the Liberal Party. So I grew up in Tasmania. I love the environment. It's a reason I'm still here. I love getting across the overland track, spent a bit of time down in the Tarkine camping, love being out in nature. That's where I get my energy from. But we can't throw away what we've got in this country as far as our economy and lifestyle and standard of living in a poorly thought out transition in our energy production. We need to think it through and be very deliberate and take the Australian people along for the journey. So, for example, in 2023, China commissioned 100 coal-fired power stations. 100 brand new coal-fired power stations. And we think that by shutting down our last 5, as soon as we can, that we're going to save the planet. We need to be a lot more deliberate in what we're doing, think it through, take the Australian people along for the journey.
With a sensible and fair transition in any organisation or industry that needs to be moved towards more sustainable methods of acting. There's a lot of talk about the Greens want to stop jobs, the Greens want to stop fun, the Greens hate everything. And it's not true, it's just fear-mongering from other places. We support and recognise that there will be some need for transition and change. That is the nature of the fact that we have to deal with climate change. And all change hurts, that's the nature of it. We recognise that. And so we want to make that as easy as possible. And so essentially, the simple answer is it will be difficult, but we support a fair and just transition. We will also attempt to mirror what has been done in other countries where it has worked successfully, so that we're not making mistakes particularly, but there's an extensive amount of science. There is a lot of information that we will be, using from other places where it has been done successfully, where they no longer run on coal, or definitely don't run on nuclear, or they have stopped native forest logging. Any of those things have been done and can be done, but we do accept that it isn't going to be without fear. And that's normal when change happens, and we accept and understand that, and are happy to discuss and reassure people.
Hydro, hydro, hydro. There are that many untapped hydro projects in this state. We led this country. We give the power to the rest of the country from Tasmania. There are many more there. And the hydro actually can support fish farms, the water security for the northwest here for all our farmers. All those three things added together, it's a win, win, win.
We want to keep going all night, don't we? I said we'd finish at 8 o'clock, which means that is all we have time for tonight. So, excuse me, this concludes our time together. Thank you to all of the candidates, and also for you joining us online and in person here. After all this talking, all these questions, please don't forget to vote on Saturday. And please continue to pray, this goes out to all our churches across the electorate, for all levels of our government, that whoever is elected may have wisdom to serve with integrity, humility and compassion for the best outcomes for all people. Thank you for joining us. Good night, everyone.